I was gonna chit chat with you guys. Have you guys all seen the discussions about dash macros? I think it kind of started because like, you know, Strive has a dash macro, and then like people were like, wouldn't it be nice if like plus R had a dash macro? Like, man, going back to plus R when you don't have a dash macro is like really weird. I feel it when I go back to plus R, where my dash macro is in Strive, you need a button map to switch colors in plus R. It's my respect or my taunt. So in a match, I try to dash and Soul just starts flipping people off, you know, and I just like start taunting and shit, and I'm like, no, like I'm so used to hitting the dash macro, my hand automatically does it. But there was like a discussion about Exer that popped up, and they're like, yeah, if there was a Rev 3, I hope that it gets rollback, it gets this change, it gets that change, and then it has a dash macro added. Essentially, a dash macro is just a button you hit that makes you dash. You immediately move, right? It's one button press to make the movement happen. Instead of having to press forward on a joystick, the travel time and the difference in execution is pretty dramatic. It means that your movement is way more precise. And that seems kind of small. You're like, why is that a big deal to dash with a button? The reason you see boomers posting things like this is that there's actually a lot of execution requirements in certain old games that are much harder. Some move FRC dash, right? Or with Eno, for instance, it's like a really important thing that you need to learn. Any projectile or any move, comboing out of it with like FRC into dash so that you can get a run and then run up and do the combo is like really important. And there are other games that have dash macros besides Strive. Marvel has 2-button dash, for instance, as well. And other games just have dash macros, right? You just hit a button and you dash, like DBFZ. Yeah, people ask for them in every game now because they're like, oh, my poor hands. Having the dash macro makes everything so much easier. But the reason I think it's extra interesting is like with a dash button comes the great responsibility of balancing a dash button. Otherwise, it gets out of hand pretty fast. It actually affects the gameplay of the video game so much. Watch this 20 seconds. I gotta say, when I saw this video, I was crying laughing, by the way. The dashing carcasses, right? That's something or other, I'll tell you what. And also, look at the backdashes. Backdash Stinger, YRC seems pretty good. And look at how fast this character backdashes. Seeing that really cracks me up, I gotta say. Seeing backdash Stinger so easily like that, I was like, ooh, not so sure about that one, Chief. Seeing back that, like, oh, I'm like, ooh. I think it actually changes the game pretty dramatically. Like, there's a lot of things that become way easier to do, and there's a lot of like defensive stuff that's like much more powerful or much harder to deal with because this kind of stuff is available, right? Like Zappa's backdash in plus R is 10 frames invuln, 11 frames total. So he has a backdash where there's 1 frame where you can hit him during it, right? That game would be nightmarish if Zappa could backdash with 1 button. And you would just think like, oh, if there's a dash macro, then I could like dash block easier and like dash FD break because you have to block in this game, for instance, right? Or I can do all my air dash confirms like way easier. Or I can like do like, that's great. It like makes this stuff easier, but it actually has such a big implication on so many characters. It's a dramatic difference having a dash macro or not. I understand wanting a dash macro. I actually don't dislike having one. I think making movement more precise and giving you what you want all the time is nice. I don't mind it. It's the same thing with like FD macros or like RC macros. Like, is the game better for me accidentally getting a button instead of FD over and over? Like, I don't imagine like it's more fun or it's like more interesting this way. If there was just an FD macro, you could just hit FD and then not get execution errors, right? But you can't just put it back in all their games and be like, yeah, it's cool, like my hands. You have to be really careful about it. It's not just like you add the dash macro and the game is like the same, basically. It has a dramatic impact immediately. It's actually the same thing though, having a dash macro and then taking it away, right? Imagine fighting Happy Chaos with no dash macro, where you have to dash by hitting forward, and then down back between every shot. How are you gonna move against that, right? It's gonna be way harder. The character is like immediately a million times better. It also makes backdashing things in pressure much easier as well, right? Imagine playing Marvel where you can't dash by using buttons. Trying to move in that game would suck. You want to like fly across the screen with Magneto, you literally have to break your wrist to try to do it, right? Imagining that is like a pure hell on earth. That game would be bad, I think. I'm gonna be honest with you. Unless you play on Hitbox to try to like mitigate the difference. But that game would be really bad without dash button movement. Everybody would just be getting zoned by Arthur or some shit. Sentinel and Doom and Arthur, and the guy's just shooting you to death with his little night hat, laughing at you.
Listen,
Yeah, in Fortnite, when you hit control, you automatically get a boost. You slide. That's a dash macro. Fortnite has a dash macro. You ever thought about that? It's like a humongous game, right? It's way bigger than any fighting game. Halo has a dash macro too. It's got a 1-button dash macro. Marvel 3 did it first. Fortnite copied Marvel 3. Does TVC have a dash macro? That's a great question. I don't know if TVC has a dash macro. I assume it does. TVC was on a console that didn't exist, you have to remember. So that's why it was a bit harder for people to play it. At least for me anyway. Hollow Knight has a dash macro. That's true. Will Silksong have a dash macro? I assume so.